Well, good evening, good evening, good
Good.
evening. Welcome. We are super excited to have you tonight as our guest
Thank you.
again for
Thank you.
another installation of Pain in the Pews Mental Health and Ministry. I am Chelselia Cookie Payne, your founder and host of this particular segment. And listen, tonight we are going to have such a dynamic discussion, such a necessary discussion. So, as you're coming on, whether you're watching with us live, we welcome you. We appreciate you for being here. Or if you're watching a replay, the same goes for you. Welcome. We're glad that you are here. We don't take it for granted that you're here being a part of this conversation. This is your platform as much as it is ours, and we literally do not take it for granted. Listen, if you haven't already heard, if you haven't already marked your calendars, do so right now because September 25th, 2021, we will be in the very midst of our seventh annual Pain and Pews Mental Health and Ministry Conference. Listen, it is going to be dynamic. The theme this year is There's Hope, There's Help.
Absolutely.
There's hope. There's help. I don't want you to miss out on this. It is going to be a hybrid event, which means part of it is going to be in person. Most of it is going to be virtual. So once we're filled up in the face to face, because we want to remain COVID friendly, the rest will be, of course, you can join us online, and you can do that by going to 2021 PITPCONF, which stands for 2021 Pain and Pews Conference, .eventbrite.com. That's www.2021pitpconf.eventbrite.com. Make sure that you get registered. We want you to be a part of this dynamic event. Listen, we've got five amazing speakers. We're going to touch on everything from parenting to pain in the pulpit to listen. I'm not even going to give everything away. You'll see. But listen, you don't take my word for it. Be there with us 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, September 25th, right here. It's going to be virtual as well as a hybrid. We're going to be live at the Windy Hill Community Center face to face. But if you plan to be a part of the face to face and virtual as well, you must register. You must register, especially if you're going to be face to face, because we want to make sure that we are being COVID friendly. So once we're filled up face to face, you know the deal. You know the deal. So we want you to be there. So be sure to go online and register. But listen, let's get down to why we're here tonight. I am honored to have someone that I just admire. She is just, oh my gosh, she is one to be admired. We met, goodness, I forget, I think it's been 5 years now,
4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years ago. And listen, we live in different states, but we are connected. We are sisters. And I'm
Absolutely.
so glad to have with me Miss Zenia Harris on tonight. Yay! Thank you, Zenia, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. It's always an honor just to connect with you and your platform. And I don't even remember how we met. I know it was through social media, obviously, but it's just the Lord ordering our
Yeah,
steps because this ministry is needed prior to this COVID environment,
yes,
prior
ma'am.
to everything that we see going on right now in life. Like God always sends, the workers out ahead. And so just to connect with people that God has ordained and appointed and anointed for the mental health ministry. It's always a blessing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Tonight, listen, we're talking about one day at a time. Listen,
Yes,
one day at
absolutely.
a time, breaking
Hmm.
down stigmas surrounding grief and opening doors to healing.
Absolutely.
We're breaking down those stigmas. Listen, let's be honest. Grief
Hmm.
is not just in one little box, number one, and how we
Absolutely.
grieve is not in one little box. Grief is
Absolutely.
not just the loss of a loved one. And Zania and I were talking about this earlier. It's not just the loss of a loved one. It could be the loss of a relationship due to divorce or a friendship or a business partnership. It could
Absolutely.
be for pastors and ministry leaders, especially during this time of this pandemic, the loss of a church, the loss of members, the loss of church as usual. There are a lot of pastors that are grieving that, not
Absolutely.
not knowing how to deal with that. There's so many that are grieving different areas and don't think that it's unusual. One thing that I love, we had a great conversation offline, you guys. Sorry you missed it. Anywho, one thing that I think is important to note is that all of these things that I just said and many more are normal
Hmm.
occurrences. The death of a
Absolutely.
loved one, these are not things that are far-fetched. Divorce and loss of a job, you know,
Hmm.
these are not things that are uncommon, but when they're all compounded back to back to back to back to
Absolutely.
back, you know, when we're inundated with it on social media, if we're inundated, we always have the TV on CNN. Stop that. Number one,
Right.
stop that.
Right.
Just
Right. Right.
stop that. But it is a bit much. So Zania, I'm gonna shift over to you for a bit. Talk to us about, because we're talking about breaking down those stigmas
Okay.
and literally open up those doors to healing. Let's start out. Well, you know what? This is Pain in the Pews, mental health and ministry. Let's talk about the pain in the pews that sometimes ministries and pastors and ministry leaders and spiritual leaders that they're facing now.
Well, and you mentioned it as a result of just the pandemic and it just quickly shifting our lives, right? This
Right.
happened without much notice. I recall initially at the onset of the pandemic, here in Ocala, our kids were out for spring break and they never went back to school. So they from spring break into summer, they were in school. And so at that time it was rapid transitions that we experienced as teachers, as therapists, as pastors, everybody in some capacity. And so the church was not left out of that. You have a wide range of smaller congregations all the way up to mega churches. And in some of those settings, a virtual platform was already established. Virtual platforms and virtual churches were normal. But then
Right.
you have some of the smaller churches that may not have utilized it as much. And so immediately having to shut down their doors and shift and learn how to adapt to some of those platforms. Lots and lots of changes. And then, of course, we have our ministries that have experienced the death of members of their congregations, the death of members of family members, still having the responsibility of the ministry, still navigating the normal stresses of ministry, if you
Right.
will. And so
Right.
to add to that, this collective grief. So our leaders and our pastors certainly are not exempt. They are human as we are. However, they still have these obligations to God and to the ministry, so it became quite overwhelming, as we talked about briefly offline. We see
Right.
members stepping down from ministry. I'm sorry, leaders stepping down from ministry.
Right.
We also experience, churches losing membership, things of that nature, because people are still afraid to return to, a congregational setting because of
Right.
COVID and now the Delta variant. So lots of transitions that we were forced to adapt to. And so,
Right.
and depending on resiliency and, just your support systems, everybody did not do that the same. Yeah.
Everybody did not. And you know what? I think that's key what you said. Everybody did not do that
Mhm.
the same, and everybody can't.
Can't. Absolutely.
Everybody
Absolutely.
can't. Everybody
Absolutely.
can't. And to be honest, that's okay.
Absolutely. It is. It
That's
is.
okay. Because what's working for, ministry X down the street,
Hmm.
church, by the river down the street may not be what God is calling for you to do. But
Absolutely.
what is he calling for you to do?
Hmm.
What, when the scripture talks about binding up the brokenhearted, it
Oh,
does not
absolutely.
leave the leaders exempt,
No, no,
right?
absolutely not.
When we, trying to find that balance and trying to make sure that, everybody's, coming back to a normal, that's
Mhm.
gone.
Right.
That's
Mhm.
gone. And so, people throw around the word, the new normal. I don't even know
It's
what,
not
if
normal.
we could right. if
It's
we can
new,
use that term, it's new.
but it's not
It's
normal.
new. It's not normal,
Right, right, right.
But even in that, making the adjustment, especially those
Mhm.
who are more seasoned, I will say,
Absolutely.
in church, in ministry, in leadership, making that shift can be a challenge. What is some of the things that you maybe have seen, or would be maybe even not seen but can suggest are things that people who are having, especially pastors, ministers, elders, who are having a hard time with this transition, because that's what it is, with
Right.
this transition, what can they do to help with that self care? I mean, it's like I was listening to a pastor saying earlier today. Before I need to secure my oxygen mask first before I can help you.
Hmm.
When you on a flight, they say
Absolutely.
make sure you secure your oxygen mask first. So, what are some oxygen mask tools or techniques or thoughts that you can give to leaders that may be experiencing this transition?
Well, the first thing that I think is important is to really understand, we toss around a lot of terms sometimes, but understanding grief, what that is by definition, understanding the difference between grief, bereavement, and emotions, right? Those
Oh,
are
oh,
three
wait a
separate
minute.
things,
Wait a minute.
closely related.
Wait
Can you
a
type it in the
minute.
chat?
I am,
Okay.
but listen, you stunned me with that.
Yeah, that's
Understanding the
important.
difference between
Grief,
grief, bereavement,
mhm, emotions.
and emotion. Yes.
Mhm, mhm, absolutely.
Okay. The mind blown emoji is like,
But
come
that's
with it.
very important. So number one, grief is just the adjustment to a loss. Like you mentioned, that could be the loss of a family dynamic, the family unit. So it's not exclusive to death. It could be empty nest syndrome, right? Your children are off to
Okay.
college and you're home alone. We think, I hear parents all the time say they look forward to that, but then I also see the experience when they have to drop their kids off at college and they
Yeah.
cry. And so this is grief. And so I want to be clear, even it could be a job, it could be relocating from one part of the state to the next part of the state. That's
Okay.
grief. Bereavement is processing the death of
Come on
someone.
now.
That's the
My.
distinction. And now the emotions apply to both. There's healthy grief, there's healthy bereavement, and then there is grief and bereavement that if we don't closely monitor it, then that's when it becomes problematic, and then could be the introduction to our mental health issues and things that we see. So I want to be clear and first, pointing out that number one, God made us with emotions. How can we love the Lord that God with all our heart, mind, and soul? How can we love our neighbor as ourselves if we do not have emotions? The Bible says, in your anger, sin not. So that clearly tells us that there are going to be opportunities that we experience emotions. The scripture that I mentioned to you, Psalm 61 and 2 or 3, I think it is. David says, when my heart is overwhelmed, lead me
Ooh,
to the rock that is higher than I. He does not say if my heart is overwhelmed. He says when. So it's a sure thing that in this life, as believers, there will be circumstances and things that cause us to be overwhelmed with these emotions. So, number one, pastors and leaders understand that these emotions are God given. It is the
right.
way that we regulate our emotions, it is the
Right.
way
Right.
that
Right.
we process our grief, it is the way that we process our bereavement. And so, a lot of times in our African American churches, and just culture too, our African American culture is immediately when we see someone in pain, we want to gravitate to them and say, don't cry,
Don't
be
cry.
strong, don't
Why
cry.
do we do that?
Why do and
Why
tears
do we do that?
and this is the thing, you need to process whatever emotion that you're experiencing at that moment, because when you keep it in, that's when we have people that look good on the outside, we put on our makeup, we do our hair, we do our nails, we dress up, we wear our suits, but on the inside, because we have not properly grieved, we're in pain. We try to work in pain, we try to parent in pain, we try to be a spouse in pain, we try to lead and pastor in pain, because there's this preconceived notion that's false, that keeping it together on the outside means that I processed it on the inside, and it does not.
No,
And
ma'am.
so,
No, ma'am.
absolutely. And so, when we do not have those moments, that is when our bodies are going to respond to grief. They're going to respond to trauma, whether we want to deal with it or not. Our bodies will shut it down on us, right? So, with that being said, help after the loss or a transition in life, even the ones that we can prepare for, if you do not process it and you don't allow yourself to experience that, then the negative happens when all of a sudden I'm having interruptions in my appetite. All of a sudden, I'm having mood swings. All of a sudden, I'm irritable. It's interfering with my parenting. It's interfering with my job. Then that is when we have an issue clinically. But before that happens, pastors need to understand. You pastors, we do so much so well, right? We carry the burdens of the people, your own things. So when there is loss and we're bereaving death, this collective death that we're experiencing right now, you have to take time and process that. And
Wow.
remember, you're being watched. And just like the anointing runs down, if we don't take care of the head, then the body is not going to be well. And so
Whew.
understanding what healthy grief is and what an unhealthy grief is, and understanding that the bereavement process, all those things are normal. And we only run into problems when we try to control them. I tell people, having conversations about grief, it's like a dance, and it's the independent party, that's dancing with you, because one day you're up, one day you're down. One day you see something that reminds you of somebody and you break down and cry. You might hear a song, you might smell something. It could be somebody's favorite food. It could be a
Mm-hmm.
restaurant, just
Mm-hmm.
a variety of things that trigger you. But
Mm-hmm.
grief is its own process. And the problem happens when we try to control it. We try to tell people how they should grieve and how long they should grieve and all of these things. And that's just not the healthy way to handle things. So I think just understanding those differences, understanding that emotions are God given, and understanding that we need to experience grief. That is normal. If
Wow.
you're in this COVID environment, if you've lost members of your family, co-workers, if you've lost unfortunately members of the congregation, and then when we look on the news, we're bombarded with the numbers. If we
Right.
think about it from a layer or a systems approach, our community has endured a loss. Our churches have endured loss. Our school systems have endured loss
Right.
of lives, loss of our normal routine, loss of our traditional learning methods, loss of our
Right.
worship methods. There's so much and so many layers that nobody has not been impacted by COVID. So we have to take that into consideration and
Right.
understand, you know, Chelsea, you there's no getting around it. Like we have to understand that this has impacted us in some type of way. And you mentioned it, new normal. It's new, but it's not necessarily normal.
It's
And
not
what
normal.
happens
Right.
is we start, without even recognizing it, our bodies, we begin to function in a way that's kind of like survival, if that makes sense. You're just always on edge, very much just like tense.
Right.
We've seen that recently in some of our first line um, staff, because they haven't fully recovered from the last round. Now they are
No. No, ma'am.
anticipating. They're anticipating. So here's where the anxiety comes in, because now I am anticipating and I'm battling thoughts about what is to come. Like, we just got over having hospitals flooded with patients, not enough equipment. I just had to deal with, picking which patient gets the ventilator, which doesn't. And now you mean I have to go through this again?
Again. Yeah.
We just dealt with shortages of protective equipment. I have to go through this again. So
Listen.
they are
Listen. You
really,
are
it's
telling the truth.
so intense right now.
It's
So
very intense. I
it's very intense.
literally I had an appointment, doctor's appointment today,
Hmm.
right? I had a doctor's appointment today. And when the nurse, I guess she just felt like I just got to tell somebody, right? Or maybe she
Yeah.
just felt comfortable with sharing it with
Hmm.
me, right? Because that happens for whatever reason. People just
Absolutely.
randomly tell me stuff. But,
Hmm.
and I know it's not random. I know,
Right. No, it's not. But
but,
I'll stay on topic.
but she, but she began to say, I said, she asked me, here's how it started. She's doing, had to have something done. And so
Hmm.
she said, I don't know how we got here, but she said, how did she put it? She said, how long did it take you to get this appointment? And I said, well, no, not long. It was only 2.5 weeks from my last appointment. I
Hmm.
said, I made my appointment at that appointment. So made that, yeah, I didn't have to call in, because she said, when you called in, I said, no, I didn't call. I was at the last appointment. I made this one.
Right.
She said, I was wondering because someone had to cancel today and the earliest they can get in is December. And
Hmm.
then that's when she started sharing with me. I said, you guys have been really busy. She said, yeah, she said, when the hospital is overflowing, she said, what happens is, she said, the hospital is just overwhelmed. She
Right.
said, she said, imagine if the hospital has 300 beds. She said, of course they have more. She said, if they have 300 beds, those who are not emergent, those who don't have to stay, she said they're routed to them. So she said that they're overwhelmed. Now, mind you, this wasn't my primary care doctor. I can only imagine their office. This is a
Right.
specialist.
Hmm.
So I'm at a specialist office, and they are seeing people. The person who worked with me today was just, she was
Wow.
like, "Oh, you're just having just one thing done." She said, "We have people in here having several things done," and I guess she just wanted to just tell
Yes, she needed to
somebody,
vent.
this is just, it's a lot.
Right.
It's a lot. And when you have, my heart goes out to those of you who not only work in ministry but work in the mental health field or in the
Hmm.
medical field, who actually are literally on the first line, first
Absolutely.
and literally on the front line, like
Hmm.
literally on both fronts, in ministry and in your profession.
Right.
My hat goes out to you, because there's a lot that is seen,
Absolutely.
and in my case heard, um,
Mhm.
that is, it can be a bit much. And so when you
Absolutely.
talked about something that was very key, and this applies not only for those who are pastors and ministry leaders and elders and those who are leadership and ministry, this applies for everyone. When you were
Mhm.
talking about taking the time to process it,
Absolutely.
don't try to hold it in and try to,
Mhm.
I can speak from experience. I can speak from experience that that does more damage than good.
Right.
It
Absolutely.
When you're trying to put on the face for everybody else,
Mhm.
when you're trying to make sure I got to stay strong for everybody
Yep.
else, or that
Yep.
is painful.
Right.
It
Right.
is
Absolutely.
painful. And for me, I was a walking zombie. I was on autopilot, and no,
And
I
that's
don't know
exactly
that
what it
people
is.
even knew.
That's the perfect term for it. It's autopilot. We get so used to just saying I'm good, I'm okay, I'm fine, or I'll be all right, or I'm too blessed to be stressed, and all of these things. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That is a
Or
perfect
even
term
if
for
you
it.
don't say it, people expect you to be, because you've
Hmm.
always been
Hmm.
the same.
Absolutely.
So when you look like you're doing okay, then
Right.
you're okay.
Hmm.
When you,
Absolutely.
but you're, and so you've got these people who are in positions of authority, no matter where they are in
Hmm.
ministry or not,
Right.
who feel like they've got to be a certain way, and they can't be vulnerable, because if I
Hmm.
show that I'm vulnerable, that shows that I'm weak, and if I show that I'm weak, they can't, they'll go somewhere else, or they won't, trust, whatever the thought
Hmm.
is. But that is a dangerous place to be,
Yeah,
and
it's a
it's a
dangerous
lonely
place.
place.
Hmm. Yep. And not only that too, I think a lot of, in doing the work that we do and training, pastors and speaking at various places and just talking to people that are not in leadership, they really do want to see that mental health and mental wellness is supported and encouraged. Like I think sometimes our leaders will really be surprised. Like if they were to survey the members of their congregation regarding
Yeah,
mental health and mental wellness, they'll find that the individuals in the church or their members of congregations, they want the resources in the church. They want
right,
information in the church because in the African American community, particularly, that is the place where we go when we're dealing with issues of life. Typically,
right.
it is first to our pastors because it is a trusted place. So to
Hmm.
have those resources and to have, our leaders support and advocate for mental wellness, it is just an additional strength and an additional benefit to the ministry. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And you and I both, we know that firsthand. We've seen
Mhm.
that firsthand.
Absolutely.
I cannot tell you the countless times I've heard, this is recent, like as recent as last week, no exaggeration, where, you know, I've heard people saying, I wish my church had this, or
Oh, all the
pastors who are
time.
saying,
Mhm.
yeah, or
Mhm.
pastors who are saying, how do I, you know, what do I need to do? I was
Right.
speaking, with someone. As a matter of fact, I have a speaking engagement. I'm at a virtual speaking engagement day after tomorrow, where I'll be talking about pain in the pews.
Hmm.
And, that one of the things is, what do we do? What do we
Hmm.
do? Right.
Absolutely.
And I applaud that because, you know, not everyone has the answers, but if you
No.
have the resources, especially
Hmm.
if you don't have, a mental health professional on staff or as a member, have some resources to come in, partner
Absolutely.
with, mental health facilities or mental health providers. They're out here
Yep.
ready, willing, and able,
Absolutely.
so, much like yourself, who are able to come in and do talks and trainings, myself, who are able to,
Absolutely.
bring in people, the
Hmm.
resources are there. I think
Yep.
that the ability to understand that there's that need is
Yep.
so important. It's so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you think about it, I always tell people that, the church is a hospital. And so if you think about how most hospitals or medical facilities are set up, they're different services, different floors. Some people need to go to
Hmm.
the ER for some things. Other people, they plan outpatient procedures and so forth. But the church is a hospital for various
Right,
issues. And I just feel like spiritually, there's the support that's needed and
right.
necessary. And we do well with that. But also, there are a group of people that come to church and will also benefit from knowing that, okay, this ministry supports mental health, even if somebody is not in the church per se, but just knowing that, I see resources in the foyer or the lobby, or just knowing that
Yes,
on, the bulletin or the marquee or my
right.
monitors, someone is saying suicide prevention helpline. Just
Yeah,
knowing that, because if I'm suffering in
yes,
silence and I sit there and I see this, I'm going to feel motivated or encouraged to
yes,
reach out. I'm going to feel like I can worship and be comfortable and not demonized or stigmatized. So it's very
absolutely.
powerful. Even small
Yes.
gestures are very powerful.
They're very powerful. And you talked about
Yeah.
the church being a hospital, and what you just
Mhm.
described is that triage.
Yep,
Because
absolutely.
before you go into all the other things that are finding out where you need to be and all like that, there's that
Exactly.
triage. And
Hmm.
that triage is a part of knowing what you need. Is this a
Exactly.
spiritual need? All of it is a
Right.
spiritual need, but
Right.
does it go farther than that? Do I
Oh,
need to,
absolutely.
is there something that is going on that goes beyond the altar call? Because
Absolutely. Yes.
after we have the altar call, which is wonderful, we need
Hmm.
that. We
Right.
need that.
Absolutely.
We need to be
Mhm.
surrounded by prayer. We need to be surrounded around those who are believers. But what if,
Absolutely.
like you said, they get to the vestibule, into the
Hmm.
foyer, into the entryway, and
Right.
that's as far as they get.
Hmm.
And,
Yes.
and what they see there is something that can help them.
Right. Or at least, or the inner peace it brings, because now these barriers and these walls that have gotten up, because a lot of times what people have reported that they have experienced is that they're afraid that their Christianity or their faith or their relationship with God is going to be judged because they're experiencing anxiety, or because it was hard for them to get out of the bed. So if you walk into a ministry and in the foyer you just see resources or handouts that
Yep.
you can pick up and take home with you, what that's going to do is that's going to set the tone for your reception to the rest of the service. Now your
The
spirit, you
rest.
may be open
Yes.
and receptive to the presence and
Yes.
the power of God because you don't have these
Yes.
walls up. So
Yes.
while I fit here, I belong here. They
Oh,
are sensitive and conscious of what I may be going through. It may not apply to only one, but what does the Bible tell us about one soul? One
one.
soul.
Come
One
on
soul.
now.
So we have to be mindful and we have to take God out of the box. You and I know that, but I always say, of course, God is not limited, or the power of God is not limited to the four walls of the church. God gives us
Right.
anointed doctors, anointed teachers. We have anointed
Yes.
lawyers. The anointing is not specific to the four walls. If it's in me
Right.
and I am the church, it goes where I
Come
go.
on now. Come on now.
So it
Yes.
may start at the altar call, but it may continue in the office in therapy. It may continue,
Absolutely.
through the therapeutic process. So we can't, enclose God. We definitely
You are
cannot.
so right. And it's funny you should say that. My last visit to my therapist is like a walking hug. I just love her. But let me tell you something. Listen, when I tell you the presence of God, when I'm taking notes because I'm what I have to, I want to go home and process. I want to think about. So I'm writing, notes. And when she incorporates God into the sessions,
Mhm.
I'm like, wait a minute now, what she
Absolutely.
just say? Wait a minute.
Absolutely.
I should know this about my business now, Lord.
Mhm.
But it's a wonderful thing. I think that people have this preconceived notion about therapy, that you
They
telling
do.
all your business to a
Mhm.
stranger.
Hmm.
Well, at some
Right.
point, you're telling all your business to somebody, whether it's on social media,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
whether
And but you know
I'm
what?
just saying.
It boils down to, and I tell people it's a matter of, cultural competency, because
Mm,
just the ability to utilize your faith. Like I tell people a lot of times, if we think about culturally, for a moment, I'll say, therapy was not something that historically was available to us. So our strength came from the hymns. Our strength
uh-huh.
came through
Right.
gathering in the house of
Right.
God. Church was our
Right.
political voice. Church was
Yeah.
our social voice, and
Yes,
churches where we
ma'am.
gathered, where we worship. So that was the hub of the African American
Yes,
community,
ma'am.
right?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so, and that's why I always say, this is not an attack on leaders. Like, churches do so much
Thank
so
you.
well. This is
Yes.
just to say
Thank
that this
you.
is an additional
Yes.
layer of support that as churches we
Yes.
can use to serve the people. It is just an
Yes.
additional layer of support. And so we know that biblically, for some people, the Bible tells us that at that same hour they were healed. The Bible tells us that some got miracles, and some it was a process of time.
As
So
they
we
went on their
don't do
way.
as
Yes.
they went. That's right. And so,
Yes.
or according to the season of time
Come on
next
now.
year. So we can't dictate how God heals, who he heals, and who he
Yeah.
uses, for that
Right.
matter. So it's just
Or
very
it could
important.
it could remain as a thorn in the flesh because we
It
don't know what
could.
that thorn was for Paul.
That's
We
right. We do
it
not know.
we do so it could remain and be a
Absolutely.
testimony for somebody else.
Absolutely. And I really think
However
it's
God does
important.
it.
Exactly. And we really can't say, and the gospel has to go forth through, four corners of the earth. So we can't dictate how that has to be done. Some people are not going to get their healing and deliverance in a church. It might be an encounter with them outside of the church. And perhaps, you're able to witness to them and they join a ministry.
Come on now.
However,
Yes.
you can't limit, salvation or healing or anything to the four walls of the church. And I think a lot of times too, in the African American community, we may not know what to expect when it comes to therapy. A lot of times we have encounters with social workers or therapists or things like that that may be court ordered or after a crisis has occurred versus being preventative. And so it
Mhm.
just sometimes takes, me having a conversation saying, okay, as Christians, we stand on the word of God. Well, that
Right.
translates into therapy. That is an affirmation, right? So
I
when we
love
say
it.
that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, that is an affirmation. So what that means is that in a therapeutic setting, if I have a client that is a Christian, we can utilize that scripture or any other scripture to affirm their faith, include their faith in the healing and therapeutic process. It's not that I'm excluding faith. I'm not excluding prayer. I'm saying that
Yeah.
it's a role we all come together. Like it's a piece of the
Yes.
puzzle. We all
Yes.
fit. That's simply, the message.
Oh my gosh. Listen, if it wouldn't disrupt everything else, I could just flip over this laptop. That was good. That was so powerful
Yeah.
because, like you said, this, Pain in the Pews, for those who, this may be your first time, it may be your 100th time. But Pain in the Pews Mental Health and Ministry is not here to offend or to bash or to say anything negative about the church or the institution of the
Absolutely
church or
not.
ministry. No, absolutely not. This is an enhancement. We
Absolutely.
said off camera, we don't want to get on here and say this is a problem. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Right.
No, we want to bring to light the things that are relevant to the people. What is the pain in the pews? But
Hmm.
then share the knowledge and wisdom and understanding that we have and the resources that we have to show that there
Absolutely.
is absolutely help and there's healing and there's hope. And you know what? This is not the end of the story.
Right.
This is not the end of the story. With Zenia, her organization is mental health is
Is ministry.
ministry.
Hmm. It is.
Mental health is ministry.
Hmm.
Like, let's put it in context. Let's think about that. One of the things that I think hinders us as a community of believers is that for so long, in my opinion, we have felt like we've got to be a certain way spiritually. We can have a physical malady. Like I told you earlier, I went to the
Hmm.
doctor, and that's okay.
Right.
That is perfectly fine. But then in just a few minutes after that, I said I saw my therapist. Now,
Hmm.
some people may, that may make people uncomfortable
Hmm.
because in our culture, it's okay to go to the doctor, go and see him about anything that's wrong with you physically.
Yep.
But the most important feature on within the human body
Hmm.
is the brain. The brain
Yep.
is more important than the heart.
Yep. If your brain is sick, your body is sick.
If
Just
your
look at it
brain is
from
sick,
a
yeah,
biological perspective or anatomy. If your brain is sick, your body is sick. Hmm. Absolutely.
I'm telling you. But I think that have we have been told that, you know, um, what are some of the things that you know, you know, out of context, let this mind be in you that's also in Christ Jesus.
Hmm.
Yes, that is, I do not doubt it. But in
Right.
context,
Right.
how is that helping someone who is going through a panic attack? How does
Hmm.
that help them?
Right.
Giving them that scripture in a time when a person is dealing with severe depression or suicidal ideations.
Right.
you know,
Right.
Give me, if you want to give me that scripture, that's fine. Put it in context and then
Hmm.
give me the number to a suicide prevention
Yeah.
line, or give me the number to a therapist, or give me the number to
Absolutely.
someone who can give me help.
And here's the other thing, the thing to that too. Sometimes, we deal with people that are so broken. For seasoned believers or believers that have grown in their faith, that may be helpful. But for someone who's been through so much and they've been
Hmm.
dealt so many challenging or difficult cards, they might not even be able to receive the love of God at that point. Like, you have to
Exactly.
get people
Yeah.
to a point where
Yeah.
they're stable, so to speak, so that they can even receive what this word is saying. You mean to tell me that my family members that I can see, that maybe gave life to me, that maybe are supposed to be here and protect me, these systems within this world and my community that are put in place to support and affirm me, you mean to tell me they failed me? And so now you want me to embrace something that, no disrespect, but embrace something that's written down? Like, everyone's not there yet. So,
Everyone's
in the
not
Bible,
there.
where we talk about the mature Christian, going from milk to solid food, it is a process. Our
Yeah.
infants, as they grow,
Yeah.
initially when they're born, we're not giving them baby food.
Right.
They're just fluids only. It's formula. And even in the beginning, it might be 4 ounces. Then it might get to 6. Then they're going to tell you to add cereal. And then they're going to tell you to slowly introduce foods, but not all at the same time, because they may have an allergy. So just take that concept and understand that it is a process. Like, there may be more seasoned people that might be able to deal with things. They may be more resilient. However, that does not mean that we don't have an obligation to kind of be sensitive to where people are
Yeah.
and kind of
Yeah.
start where they are, and then you continue to minister to them, to edify them, and to
Absolutely.
strengthen them. And so then they get that personal relationship with Christ. But we have to lay the foundation. By loving kindness have I drawn thee.
Drawn thee. Yes.
And
And
I think that.
and to your point about the milk and the milk to the solid food, as far
Mhm.
as the season and the mature. But think about it. Think about a person who's been wounded, someone
Yes,
who's
absolutely.
gone through a surgery. I mean, a physical wounded, right?
Hmm.
There's time during that healing process where they can't start eating solid food right away.
Absolutely.
They've
Absolutely.
got to eat the clear broth. They've got to have the
Hmm.
soups. Then they move up to the applesauce and the mashed potatoes.
Right.
Even though they went in, they were seasoned when they came
Hmm.
in,
Hmm.
but something shook them.
Something happened.
Something
Absolutely.
happened, and
Hmm.
now they've got to be built. That they not that they weren't able to digest the meat before. Not that
Right.
they didn't have an appetite for the meat before. Not
Hmm.
that they're not. But right now, there's a
Yeah, life
healing that's
happens.
got to take
Mhm.
place.
Right. And
And
not only
and
that, too, I think sometimes when we see people that might be dealing with certain things, we forget that we need to rule out some medical things. You and I have discussed this on lives before. There could
yeah,
be sometimes that, say, for example, our aging population,
right.
if they have certain health issues, such as a urinary tract infection that's left untreated, it may cause them to have symptoms that also are associated with psychosis. But
Yes,
they're
ma'am.
not psychotic. They're not delirious. It's just
And
they
and
have
they have
infection in their
dementia.
body.
Right.
Yeah,
They don't
right.
have dementia,
Exactly.
but it
Also,
mirrors that.
it mirrors that. And then also we see that with some vitamin deficiencies. We see that with some thyroid issues. So again, sometimes, Black culture, sometimes we may demonize things or judge it and say you don't have no faith or
Hmm.
you're not praying. But it may be that that individual needs to see their doctor first. Let's just make sure everything is normal. Everything is not demonic. Like, I am a part of fivefold ministry, Pentecostal,
Hmm.
apostolic. So I have seen both sides. So I can
Yes,
tell you
ma'am.
that everything is not.
Yes,
Everything is
ma'am.
not demonic. So it's sometimes we do a disservice to hurting people that may be coming seeking help by automatically assuming that they're demon, that it's a demon or something, and then telling a broken person or a hurt person that does not understand,
Yeah.
the way that we do church and different things of that nature, that they're possessed with them. Like, I'm never gonna go back. Like, what?
Right.
So I just
Yeah,
think we have to
that's a
understand.
spirit, and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
people don't understand that, or
right,
even if they do have an understanding of it, especially, well, let me put that, especially if they have an understanding of that, that is a hurtful thing
right.
when I'm crying out for help and you're
Mm-hmm.
telling me that that's a spirit,
Right.
that, it I have talked to, and it hurts my heart over
Mm-hmm.
the past 7.5, 8 years that I've been doing pain in the pews. It hurts my heart the number of people
Mm-hmm.
who stayed out of church
Right.
for years. I talked to one lady who, I'm in my 50s, and she was older than me, so I don't know. Well, I know she was older than me, but for a span of maybe 2 decades, or close to 2 decades, she
Wow.
was out of church, not away from God. She still
Mm-hmm.
loved God, but she was confused because
Right.
of how she was treated when she was going
Mm-hmm.
through a mental health challenge at a church.
Absolutely. That's
That's just
unfortunate.
one example, but I've heard countless stories, and it hurts my heart because how do I, as a person who may have just met them, most of these people I literally am just meeting because it's because of one of my speaking engagements.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them I'm just meeting. It's a hard thing to try to help with that,
Right.
like because it's not that they, it's not a God thing. For
Right.
by and large, for the people I've spoken
Absolutely.
to, there are some people who said they were angry with God, but they came out of it. It wasn't God. They realized it wasn't God. But by and large, it wasn't a God thing. It was a hurt thing, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, Lord, help me to minister to those people
Right.
who are
Absolutely.
hurting, because other than showing them the love of Christ and
Mm-hmm.
showing them, that sometimes people just don't have an understanding, and just giving examples of, people just, people don't know how to deal with something. They revert to what feels
Right. And
common
I
or
mean, and
comfortable
I
to them.
And you're absolutely correct. And I mean, I think that we have biblical examples of that. We have the way that Christ conducted his ministry. We have the disciples, who were being taught, and then we have the Sadducees and we have the Pharisees. And so there's a clear distinction with the way that Christ dealt with people and how he handled people compared to even the disciples and the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Think about the woman with the issue of blood. Against all, she took a chance,
Yeah.
but and what did the disciples say? And Jesus said, so if you just
Right.
think about things like, if you think about things like that, if you think about,
That's a good point.
the woman at the well, compared to
Yes.
how Jesus ministered to her, the instance in the Bible where
Yeah.
Jesus says, where art thou accusers? If you
Yes,
think
ma'am.
about those things, that
Yeah.
really kind of helps us understand human nature, not justifying it, but helps us really understand that there is
Understand it.
there is the
Yeah.
love of God, and then
Yeah.
there's people, and unfortunately the way that we interact with people sometimes, or the way that we judge, or the way that we treat people, does not always line up with the love of God, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Those are some
Yeah.
excellent examples, because you're
Yeah.
right. If we look at, and these were men, devout men who followed Christ. They were with him, and saw
Absolutely.
and knew him and were intimately close to him as men
Right.
walking with Jesus. But even in their position of walking with Jesus in the
Hmm.
flesh, they still missed it
Right.
sometimes,
Right. And sometimes we do.
and
Hmm.
we do. and
Yeah.
and 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 here's the thing, to your point with the disciples, there was no malicious intent.
Right. Nope.
They
Nope.
didn't mean to send the woman with the issue of blood. What do you mean, who touched you?
Right. Right.
All these people, or the woman at the well, even
Right.
more,
Yes, definitely.
you know
And she
um
became the first female preacher. She went and preached and told her story about what Jesus did. And because of that, nations and people came to the Lord. So,
Exactly,
absolutely.
exactly.
Hmm.
But I love your perspective and how you brought that biblical example to modern day times. That
Absolutely.
we have to be, the word you used earlier was sensitive.
Hmm.
I love that. We don't always get it right. We don't always, but if we have a heart to be sensitive,
Hmm.
I think that God will manage and make us, and help us to see in those areas.
Right.
And as you
Especially in these
said,
trying times. Especially in these
especially,
trying times. Hmm.
yes, yes, because as I said a moment ago, we started out, we were talking about leaders and pastors and
Hmm.
elders and ministry leaders, but this really, it's not just for those in leadership positions. This is for
Absolutely.
everyone
Hmm.
who's experienced any kind of loss. And again, especially if you're just joining, grief is not just the loss of a loved one.
Right.
Grief can span so many different areas that has nothing to do with the physical death. It can include it, but it's not limited
Mhm.
to it. And how you grieve is how you grieve, and there's no time limit on it. I know
Right.
that you've seen that there are 5 stages of grief. They are in no particular order, and they can
Right.
bounce
It's doop,
around.
doop, doop.
They can listen. They can take
Absolutely.
you on a rough. Listen, I speak from
Hmm.
experience. They can
Absolutely.
take you all over the place. But
Hmm.
and you know what? Be willing to acknowledge and accept that you know
Right.
what? Today is not a good day for me.
And that's
I'm
okay.
having a moment. I'm having a moment, and acknowledge it instead of saying I'm all right, and inside you just is broken.
Hmm.
It's okay to not be okay. It's okay
Absolutely.
to, you know what, I need a moment, or do you have a minute to just talk? And
Hmm.
really, sometimes when people say, can you have a minute to talk? They really just kind of want you to listen.
Hmm. Absolutely.
They really just kind of want you just to listen. You don't have to really, you know, give your insight or give your input, or or I know how you feel because I lost my, or I
Right.
know how you feel because I went through. Then you shifted it over to you.
Right.
Just
Right.
let them lead the conversation, and you
Hmm.
just be there to support. Don't turn it into, I know how you feel because I remember when
Right. Right. Right.
well,
Right.
well,
Hmm.
how's that? But
Right.
no,
You're right.
just
It happens.
it happens, try, and I get it, some people are trying to be empathetic and let you know that you're
Right.
not in this by yourself, but
Right.
sometimes it
And it's
takes
it's yeah, they mean well.
they
Absolutely.
mean well. They
Absolutely.
mean well, but this is, just to help, people in, as going forward. When people,
Hmm.
are starting to tell you their story, let them tell you their story.
Yeah. Or ask them, what do you I see that you're having a hard
Come
time
on
and
now,
I
I see
care
where you're
about you.
going.
What can I do for you right now? What is it that
Yes,
you need? Do you need me to just listen? What
yes,
is it that you need?
yes.
They may not want to hear about, what is it? How can I support you? I have a colleague that, she lost her mom, and I sent her a text message and offering my condolences, and then I said to her, let me know what I can do to support you. You know, how can I be there for you? And sometimes you may not know, and it could be after the funeral and after
Yeah,
everyone's rushed to be there. It could be much later. That's typically when the most support is needed, in those moments where you have
yeah,
nobody, and the people that love you, they were there, but
yeah.
they went back to life as normal. But for you, who've experienced the loss of a
It
mother, a child,
stopped.
it's totally different. Like, your
Yeah,
life is shook. It's not the
it
same.
it
You
has
know,
stopped.
it's
Yeah,
so exactly. So a lot of times the support comes in at that time as well. But I think, our intents are well. We want to
yeah,
immediately rush into the aid of somebody that's hurting, because we don't like to see
yeah.
people hurting. And we
Hurting.
gotta say
Yeah,
something. But silence and embracing is very powerful. It's very therapeutic. Hugs are therapeutic. Just
yeah.
that skin to skin contact, sometimes just holding somebody's hand, letting somebody cry. That's very powerful.
It is.
Absolutely. Hmm.
I saw a post of someone, this was last year, and they had lost their mother. And it was such a good post. I mean, it was touching, but it was a good post. She
Hmm.
said, I've never lost a mother before. I never lost a parent before. I'm paraphrasing. But she
Hmm.
said, I don't, when you ask me, what can I do or what do you need? In this moment, I don't know.
Right. And that's okay.
So just send me stuff. Just
Whatever you
you
want.
know, send me some
Mhm.
tea, or just do whatever. Just do it. And if I can
Mhm.
use it, I can use it. If I can't, I can't. But don't ask me. Just do it, because I'm not thinking clearly, so I don't
Right.
know what to tell you. I don't. She said, I love what she said, Zenia. I don't know what I need. I've never
Hmm.
been here before.
Right. Absolutely.
I love that. And you
Hmm.
know what? For those people who may not, it may not be, like I said, the loss of a loved one. It could
Hmm.
be the loss of a job. You may have
Yep.
never been without employment. You know, I don't
Hmm.
know what I need. Well, with someone who's lost a job, you know what they need.
The money. Absolutely.
Come on now.
Hmm.
If someone who's experienced the loss of a friendship or going through a
Hmm.
divorce,
Hmm.
they don't need your example. They don't need a man or woman bashing session. They need
No, we
somebody
do
just
not.
who can.
We don't. Don't judge my face. Wait a minute. Been there. Still dealing with it.
Zenia,
Absolutely. I'm just
I wasn't
transparent.
ready. I wasn't ready.
I know.
But a listening
But you're
ear,
correct. Hmm.
send them a book and something. But don't go into that girl or man.
Hmm.
No,
Hmm.
no, they don't. No,
Yeah.
someone who's experiencing, the loss of business. Some people went out. A lot of people started businesses, but some people lost their business. They had to shut their doors.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
instead of, especially if you were one that didn't patronize them in the beginning, help, send them a Kroger gift card or,
Oh yeah.
whatever,
Yep.
do something that you would want somebody to do for you. Do something,
Absolutely.
do something that you want. You got me tickled now.
Oh,
Do
I'm just
something
yeah.
that you would want.
Listen,
I wasn't
listen.
ready, Janine. I
But
wasn't
and
ready.
I'm not gonna get into any details, but I would just say it is an experience dealing with that in a church, church, especially a smaller church, it's tough. So I will say you're absolutely right. Just send them coffee if they like Starbucks, if they like Dunkin' Donuts. Don't if you
Yes,
love them
ma'am.
before, keep loving them. They
Keep
need all the love they can
Oh,
get,
I
okay?
like that. I
Absolutely. Love
like
me
I'm putting
before,
if
keep
you
loving
love
me.
me, yes.
Keep loving
Oh,
me.
oh
Absolutely.
gosh,
And
I'm
you know
putting
who
that.
we often overlook, I think, sometimes with this grief and this COVID right now is our teenagers and our adolescents. Because
Yes,
if
that's
we
one.
think
Yes,
about,
yes, yes,
we've
yes.
seen a lot more anxiety, a lot more admissions to the crisis stabilization units here. And a lot of times that is because if we just think about it, we're talking about, although they are growing and sometimes they physically look like adults, but we're talking about from a developmental perspective, you know,
Yeah,
children, right?
yeah,
Or young adults, adolescents, however you want to phrase it. But so typically outside of a COVID environment, they're dealing with so much. There's
yeah.
this longing and desire for independence, yet this need for adult guidance still, adult
Mm-hmm.
provision. And so now, we take COVID and we add that to the mix. We have their high school, requirements, studying, balance, and maybe extracurricular activities with
Right,
studying, maybe a part-time job. And
right,
now socialization is very important for the adolescent age. It's very critical. If you ask a teenager what's important to them, their friends is going to be on that list. That's just a part of that developmental stage. And so now
right,
you take COVID and now kids are forced to learn at home. Or what about the kids that may have learning challenges or they may learn differently? And so learning from a computer is really not the best way for them. What about the kids that school is their safety net? School is where I know I'm going to get at least maybe 2 meals. School is where
right,
I feel safe, but now I'm
right,
home all day and maybe
right.
an environment where there may not be food, there may
Maybe,
not be
or it
running
may not be
water, there may
safe.
be some abuse, it may not be safe.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about the kids now thinking about if they're going to have to experience this again, and so there's a lot that our young people do go through that sometimes we often overlook. And then we'll see the behaviors and say, oh, teenagers, and I'm guilty of it too because I have two of them. But we'll see the behaviors and we'll just think like, Lord, help me. But a lot of times, depression and anxiety, it presents in that age group, especially with our Black males, as irritability, as
Mm-hmm.
frustration. So we kind of have to keep those things in mind. And so I would just
And
tell
that
parents,
isolation as well.
absolutely
Yeah.
isolation,
Mm-hmm.
in the room playing video games or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
I just always tell people that, our parents, that are grandparents, that are aunts, godparents, whatever, just to be mindful and not assume that everything is okay because you're not seeing maybe some of the stereotypical signs. Just try to be a little bit more sensitive and have a little bit more conversation so that we can kind of go ahead of the issue or be preventative, so to speak.
I love it. Do
Yeah.
not assume that everything is
Yeah.
okay. I
No, 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 no.
can't.
Because a lot of
especially
times with
now.
our young people, here's the thing. If you think about just going back when we were teenagers or whatever the case may be, if we worked up the nerve to have a discussion about certain topics with our parents or whatever the case may be, think about how much nerve it took for you to have that conversation.
Come on
Think about the
now.
fact that you may have had it with your friends first.
Yeah,
You may have, did everything that
yeah,
you could do. But here's the real of it: as parents and as maybe Sunday school teachers, youth leaders, and things of that nature, teachers, counselors, the information that we share is going to be for their best interest. So we want to create an environment where they're comfortable coming to us,
right.
because if they're reaching out to their friends may be just as uninformed or ill informed as they are. So when they do work up the nerve to come to us, we want to make
Right.
sure that we're able to respond to them in a way that kind of helps them, and that we hear them out instead of just responding as a parent, that just like
Exactly.
oh my God. So yeah, definitely.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
before we close out, I definitely want to include another population that we always assume is okay, and that's our elders.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially dealing with exponential losses, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and
Absolutely.
wondering if they're, how it's going to affect them. And, before COVID,
Oh,
even before COVID, our seniors who are dealing with late onset depression, and we
absolutely.
just, don't, we just take it as, oh, that's just them getting older. That's not just a part of getting
Mm-mm.
older. No,
Right.
that's
Right.
not,
Depression is not typical or
no.
normal at any age. Right.
No, sitting in a dark house with the
Mm-hmm.
blinds and curtains drawn, sitting, quiet and not. No, if
Right.
Papa and Mama, that's not how they normally are.
Right.
I'm just saying
No, you're
but
absolutely
sometimes
right.
we forget about them, literally.
Mm-hmm.
We don't go to the nursing homes. Well, I know we can't, now, but there, I even suggested, for people who love working with our senior citizens, they, most of the senior citizens homes, senior citizens assisted living homes. That's what I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
say. Assisted living homes. They usually have a community room, and
Yep.
if you can set up a Zoom where they can have little
Mm-hmm.
activities. Something where you can have a story type. Because these are our history keepers, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely.
This is a
Absolutely.
generation where that particular generation that we have now.
Mm-hmm.
Once they start to leave us, a lot of the family histories are leaving with them.
Oh, and I had that conversation with my mom recently. I was like, I'm glad you know, because I don't even know who they are. Like, she
Right.
knows all these people, generations that even have passed down. I'm glad she's just like a walking family tree. I'm just like, who? Like, I don't
Right.
know.
We
Yeah,
and a
absolutely.
lot of us don't know,
Hmm.
our parents' age or our parents' age. Don't Our history keepers, there's a
Right.
lot we don't know. And
Hmm.
checking in on our history keepers is important, to show that they still have value, that they are loved, that they're gonna be all right too.
Hmm.
They made it through 2020, and now we're in 2021, and every day they're living in fear because the news is always telling them that
Hmm.
that the boogeyman is coming to get them first. If you know what I'm saying. So it's
Right.
just we have to be cognizant of the fact that the mothers of Zion in the church and the deacons at the church, the
Absolutely.
elder members of our church, of our community,
Hmm.
we have to make sure that we are connecting with them. So I want to
Absolutely.
make
No,
sure
you're
that
right. Because I mean, I worked in a nursing home before, as a social services director, and I was blown
oh,
away by the number of patients that never had visitors. Like they hadn't seen their
mhm.
children. How many years did you say? Oh,
Wow,
5 years.
years. Wow, wow,
And I was definitely
wow.
blown away by that. And so, a lot of times, you have like the recreational therapists, and they do birthday parties. They just do so much. They have churches coming in, they have different groups coming in. But like you said, right now in the COVID environment, we can't do that. So now the people that normally, or the patients that normally, or residents that normally have visitors, they can't have visitors. But now the people that never had visitors, they don't even have the benefit of the planned activities, the birthday parties, or the things that people did in house to kind of keep them, engaged and active. So when we
Wow.
talk about isolation, and you say that you don't use it, you lose it. Well, if we think about just physical activity and just
Hmm.
being just like almost dormant because of COVID, and you can't, and then people are dying all around you, and
Right.
and the way that the staff is engaging, maybe the tech or the person that used to be so kind and used to help you with your hair and help you with your earrings and come and sit down on the bed and chat with you for a few minutes before they speak to the next resident, they can't do that anymore. Their
Yeah.
interactions have to be straight to the point, and
Yeah.
because again, COVID. So it's definitely, you're definitely right when you talk about that population, because, and just imagine as somebody that may have a relative in an assisted living or a nursing home, just, you can't go see them.
Can't see him.
You can't
No.
see. It's hard enough, especially for some people in our culture, to have to include nursing homes in the plan of care for our relatives.
Hmm.
Now imagine including it in the plan of care and I can't visit.
Right.
Just,
Right.
yeah. So you're right. COVID has touched every age, every
Every
developmental stage. Yes, ma'am.
every single one. So
Hmm.
Zania, I am so listen. This has been great. This is an
Yes, it's been
hour went
great.
by. An
I
hour
know.
went by like that. Like, oh my gosh. So listen, guys, I want you all to see how to stay connected to Zania. I want you to be sure that you're following her on Facebook. When and
Yes,
you can do that by going to facebook.com/mental health is ministry.
yes.
That's facebook.com. You can type in mental health is ministry. You can also find her on Instagram, and that is mental health and faith chick.
That's it on Instagram.
That's her on Instagram. And of course, if you're interested in her being a speaker, which you want, lean in. You want her to be your speaker. So, in order to do that, you go to mentalhealthspeaks@yahoo.com.
Yes,
Screenshot that, write it down, do what you need to do, get this information because you want Zania to come and speak to your congregation. And when I say come, you see, she's here virtually. She's in Florida. I'm in Georgia.
absolutely.
Listen, it's possible to do, and
Definitely.
this is what you want. She has a great program and platform for ministry leaders. Our leadership needs
Absolutely.
support. She wants to help you. She has the tools, the strategies, the information, the education to help you. I'm leaving that up
Absolutely.
there on the screen for a reason. Listen, guys, this is your
Thank you. Thank you.
opportunity for you to get her information. You want Zania to come and you want her to be a part of your ministry. And listen, even if it's not your ministry, it can be your family. What you may have a family Zoom and you want her to come in and
Absolutely.
speak. You know what I'm saying? It could. I'm giving y'all ideas and suggestions now. Take it in. It could be your organization, your group, your sorority. Listen, this is great information where help and healing can come
Absolutely.
together. So listen,
Absolutely. I'm
Zania,
happy to
thank
help.
you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation.
Thank you for
I
having
am
me.
honored. I mean, we really covered a lot of ground, and
We
I'm
did.
just so grateful that we were able to have this conversation
Yeah,
again, one
definitely. It's
day at a time.
necessary.
Yeah,
One day at a
very
time.
necessary.
Absolutely.
One day at a time.
Mhm.
Listen, we appreciate you all for being a part of tonight. As always, we are grateful for you. Any donation that you would like to make in support of Pain and Glory, specifically this initiative, Pain and the Pews Mental Health and Ministry, is greatly appreciated. You can do so via Cash App, $ Pain and Glory spelled out, or via PayPal at cpain@painandglory.com. Again, don't forget, coming up
Yes.
in just a little over 30 days, the Pain in the Pews Mental Health and Ministry Conference, our seventh annual conference, is coming up. There's hope, there's help, it's coming up. Listen, you don't want to miss it. It's going to be great. I want you guys to go ahead and register. And you can do so at PITP. I'm sorry, it's 2021 PITP. Let me put it up there before I say it wrong. 2021 PITPCONF.eventbrite.com. That's the 2021 Pain in the Pews conference that we're having. I'm super excited. Again,
Oh,
thank you all
exciting.
for joining with us. Zanaya, don't go anywhere. Thank
Okay.
you guys for joining us on tonight. We'll be back on next week with yet another guest with yet another topic. We appreciate you joining in. Listen, continue to be well, continue to be blessed. Know that there is help, know that there is hope, and know that God has you. God has you. We are not just doing this just to be doing it, but listen, we do this with prayerful intent and knowing that God is in control. Have a
Absolutely.
wonderfully blessed evening, and we'll see you next week.